Good evening. This is Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by two former United players to talk over a tumultuous week at Manchester United. When is it not a tumultuous week at United at the moment? As you can see, I'm joined by Lee Lawrence and Phil Marsh. I'll get to those guys in a moment. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to get your comments and questions in. If you're watching the replay, say hello. Feel free to comment. We do reply. If you're watching live on the Twitter feed, if you post comments under the tweet where the video's streaming, then I'll get to try and get to them if I can. I'm still learning how to use that. If you're listening back on the audio podcast, please be sure to like and leave a review and subscribe on the platform you're listening on as well. We'll start with Phil this week. Phil Marsh, former United striker. How are you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, good, mate. Thanks. Back in work this week, so getting back into a bit of a routine. And yeah, it's obviously been a long time for me with obviously the operation and stuff. So yeah, just glad to have a bit of normality back, mate.
Are you dealing with that at the moment?
Yeah, getting there, mate. I say it's I'm not rushing back, as I say. I'm just taking it week by week and just sort of seeing how it goes. Feeling good, as I say, as the weeks have gone by. I'm gradually getting there, and yeah, I'm back in training, albeit I'm not fully doing everything as much as probably the other lads are at the minute, but it's feeling good, and hopefully, as I say, in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks, hopefully I'll be in a position then where I can hopefully maybe join in and look to be sort of back playing in the next couple of weeks after that, hopefully.
Nice. Also joined by former United defender, Shrewsbury Town legend Lee Lawrence. How are you doing, Lee? All right?
I won't go as far as legend, mate. Yeah, I'm fine, mate. Thank you. Busy week at work as usual, especially in this heat. It's not been the best. Trying to fit boilers and bathrooms in 30 degrees. It's not been great. So it's nice to get. Well, I've literally walked in 20 minutes ago, jumped in the show, and jumped straight on the podcast. So it's not over yet, but hopefully I've got a weekend off. So I'm looking forward to a nice weekend with the family, mate.
You had no chance of getting off this week after the grief I was giving you last week. And I'll tell you, you can be modest and throw away Shrewsbury Town legend, but you were a member of their all-time greatest team. So if you're in their all-time 11, then unfortunately, mate, you got to carry that modesty with you. All right. Difficult week starts with a difficult defeat. Arsenal 3, United 2, 3-1, even nearly 2. If we did had that goal that was allowed. Very weird game. There were a lot of calls that were checked. A lot of calls from the referee that were disputed. United eventually looking good for a draw, to be fair, as the game was closed. I thought in the second half they were probably bossing it. And when they scored, I didn't think that the Garnacho goal was against the run-up play. And then obviously it's disallowed. Very, very tightest of margins. We can debate that whether or not it was offside. Then from then, I worded it pretty harshly as a collapse. It probably wasn't. United's heads went a little bit, and disputed winner by Rice was Johnny Evans pulled back, and then they go and score a third goal, which just kills the game off. United end the game with Maguire and Evans, sort of like the fifth and sixth choice centre backs, really playing in there. And I suppose you're going to concede chances. If you play 25 minutes with those players, you're going to let chances. You're probably going to concede a goal to the team that finished second. So very eventful game. Lee, I'll come to you first on this one. What did you make of it? Do you think that United were unlucky? Do you think that we were perhaps pushing our luck for a draw?
I think the game went really, especially the first half, the way we said on the podcast last week, we thought it was going to go, on the back foot a lot, especially in the first half. I think we did well to obviously go 1-0 up. It was definitely against the run of play at that point. It was a mad game, wasn't it? It was a real mad game where it was stop-start, decisions here, decisions there. If I've got to be totally honest, I think Arsenal probably did deserve, probably the win at the end of the day. But like you say, the penalty for when they was shouting for the penalty against Wan-Bissaka. I thought it took me about 2 seconds, to realise it was never a penalty in the memory of man. He kicked Wan-Bissaka, it was playing. But what did me any more than anything was on the commentary, Gary Neville was more or less calling it a blatant penalty. It should be a penalty. I was screaming at the TV saying, what is he looking at? We seem to be getting a lot of that recently. There were, people saying we get all the decisions, but at the moment in time, I feel like the decisions are going against us, really. You know what I mean? The offside against Garnacho, that's where I think VAR, it lets itself down a little bit. For me, that's too close to call. I suppose it should be in that situation where you've the finest the margins. It should always go to the attacking side, in my opinion. Whether that's for a United player or against the United player, and I think that's where sometimes VAR lets itself down. I think if we go in 2-1 at that point in the game, we probably sit back and try to kill the game off more than we did, and we could have, we would have been good for at least a draw. I think that was a turning point. Another point I've got to make was Declan Rice's goal. I think at first I thought Johnny Evans was foul, but when I look back, I thought, no, it's a bit soft if he gives that. I can't get it out of my head that if that was the game in nets with his reactions, would he have saved that? I know it took a deflection off Johnny Evans, and you needed quick reflexes, but I just think the guy saves that. So I'm Jury for me still out on a 9. I'm still not 100% sold, if I'm being honest with you. Time will tell. It's still very early days with our new signings. You know what I mean? To be honest, I thought the foul on Ireland in the box was more of a penalty shout than what Wan-Bissaka's was it? He put his arm around him and dragged him down. But again, the commentator just seemed to wipe it off as though it was a nothing. For me, it was, that was much more of a penalty shout than what it was what Bissaka would have given away. So I feel like we was unlucky in the game. But no way would I say we was the better team and we deserved to win, because I don't think we did. The third goal, like I say, it's one of them where you're just pushing to get an equaliser and they catch you on the break. Not much you can do about it. But yeah, for me, really weird game. I won't say an enjoyable game. I didn't really enjoy it, if I'm being honest with you. I just wish that we could start dominating teams like we used to, instead of catching them on the counter attack. I want to see a game where for 90 minutes we're the better team. We don't look like we're going to get done on the break, and it just doesn't seem to be coming yet, does it?
No, it's certainly not in the big games, certainly not away from home. And I think that was a big disappointment for me, is that regardless of where we are and where we've come from, it's still a place where we need to get to. And we've spent a lot of money, and it doesn't look, like we said last week's pod, I'm not sure how close we are to that, which is quite disappointing. Having said that, Phil, like last season we were talking about fine margins, we lost in the last minute and Casemiro was missing, so we're saying Casemiro had been fit. And now we're saying if Varane, if Martinez had stayed on, those kind of things. Shaw had been fit, or Malacia even had been fit to put some balance on that side. So they are fine margins, and perhaps you can sort of understand United not being able to take the game because they're having to deal with all these changing pieces. But the result is the result, and United are always judged on the result. They're never, fairly or not. That's and I will be talking about the profile of the club quite a lot on this podcast, but that is what United deal with, isn't it? It doesn't matter how many players are missing. They're judged on the first team. You guys would have, Phil, you would have done that when you played for the first team. You judged as the first team, the Manchester United first team, and that's what you've got to do. And those players were there, and they didn't hold out, and we lost the game. I didn't find myself too upset by the nature of the loss. You would be if you thought that United were going to be in a title race this season, but if you sort of temper it with the expectation of we're probably not, and it's unfortunately another season of measuring where we're going to be, what that gap is, then the result in that context isn't that bad. But I think Lee's got a point. Like, the disappointing thing is that no matter what, no matter the circumstances, you do kind of want to see a United team going for it. And I guess we saw it at some points in the second half. What did you make of the results? It is a funny one. Like Lee said, we probably didn't deserve to win the game. And on reflection, the results, the refereeing decisions, they did have an impact. Did they really have an influence on the game? I'm not too sure. Now, they obviously did in terms of Garnacho. I agree with Lee that I think Garnacho's goal should have stood. But anyway, go on. Tell me what did you make of the game?
I mean, I pretty much agree with Lee, really, in the fact that over the 90 minutes, I think on the whole, I think Arsenal probably did just about deserve the win. It just obviously hurts a little bit, and it's just probably a little bit more sombre in the manner, really, that they won the game. I think, obviously, with them 2 late goals and sort of just before having the Garnacho goal ruled out, which, again, for me, these VAR decisions, you see one week and it looks like, they're measuring it from one part of the body. And then, again, you look at it another week and it seems to be a different part of the body. I would always put it in favour of the attacker. Being a striker myself, you always want to see goals. And for me, whether it was the United player or an Arsenal player, I would have been in favour of the attacker having the sort of benefit of the doubt on that one. But yeah, it was one of them. I think at the moment with Manchester United, because we've got, not the expectations, because we're not, dominating games, as Lee was saying there, well, we want to. I think the expectations are sort of, can we get top 4 again? Maybe get a trophy. Whereas really, you'd want to see a bit more of a higher trajectory with the players that we've signed, and it just doesn't seem really for me that everything's gelling at the moment with all the other stuff that's going on around the club. With obviously the Mason Greenwood incidents and other, the Anthony stuff, and it just feels as though at this moment in time the club's not really in a great place, and obviously the results against the top 6 have been a massive issue for us, especially away from home, which for me is the main marker really of where you are as a club. And I think obviously we've played 2 of the top 6 probably that are going to be this year in terms of Tottenham and Arsenal, and we've probably come up well short really. So it is going to be a long season. I think when you analyse probably the 4 games that we've had so far, we're probably lucky really to be on as many points as we are. You can look at the Wolves game and say, we was lucky there to get away with a win with the Onana incident at the last minute. Could have been a draw, or Wolves would have been, for me, good for the win on that game because we was so bad. And then obviously the other game against Nottingham Forest, we're 2-0 down after 5 minutes. So it's not really been a stellar start by any stretch of the imagination. I think there's a lot of individual performances that need to be better, and then obviously collectively it's difficult to judge because we've had so many injuries and players maybe playing out of position or whatever. So I think it's a well needed break really with this international break, and hopefully we can come back a lot stronger and with a bit more of a point to prove.
Yeah, and evening Dan will be doing well, mate. A difficult week. Our good mate Dan there, and he says the biggest disappointment isn't so much the result, it's the fact that we can already see 4 games in that we're battling for 4th place. Lee, do you think that that's a fair call?
Yeah, definitely fair, mate. Yeah, we're not. For what I've seen so far, I don't think we've kicked on whatsoever from last season, which I was hoping we were going to do. We had a decent season last season, and I thought we might have had a chance of kicking on with a few decent signings this year, and hopefully, like I say, I just want to see games where we look like we deserve to be in the top 2 or 3 in the country, and dominate a game. But it's like Phil's just said, from the 4 games we've seen, it doesn't look like we've got out to second gear yet. I think that's a lot down to do with, like we mentioned last week on the podcast, there's no correlation with your partners at the moment when you're playing on the field because of the injury situation. That's for me is a massive factor. They're not getting that game identification with each other, and it's hard. It really, really is hard if you're playing with someone else week in week out, and you're not forming that relationship. And at the minute, I'm not quite sure how long the lads are out for, but we've got a vast number of injuries at the moment, and it doesn't seem like they're going to get that chance to create the bonds throughout the team to push on. It's a shame. It's a shame that a lot of it's down to injury.
Just on that, do you know what? Obviously, when you look at your Man Cities and stuff like that, I mean, they probably haven't had as many injuries as us really in the most recent of times. But when I look at them and they have maybe 1 or 2 injuries and the players come in who replace them, that doesn't change the way they play at all, and doesn't change the levels of performance. Whereas, okay, you can say that Man City's got a far better squad than us, which is true, because they have spent a lot of money as well. But I just feel like we've had a lot of time now to sort of bridge that gap, and we've spent a hell of a lot of money, and we've backed players, we've been and spent the top dollar. And for me, I still to this day think sometimes when our strongest 11 isn't on the field and we bring maybe 2 or 3 other players in that are meant to be, like for like, or as good as, or the competition should be there so that you're trying to keep that place, you can see the difference in performance, and that the dip is quite noticeable, really, which for me is really worrying, because obviously throughout a season you're going to need a big squad for the competitions that you're playing in. You've always got to legislate for injuries, suspensions, and I think by the way we've looked in this first 4 games, we look well short in terms of being able to compete on all fronts, really, and sort of live with the demands that come with playing in the Premier League and all the competitions.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Sorry, Lee.
So just on that part, I think, like say, Phil, on an identity of playing. For how long has it been now that we just look like a counter-attacking team? Do you know what I mean? It's been years upon years that we just look like we just want to. We're happy to sit back and hopefully we get that chance where we've got Rashford or someone who can do something, off the cuff, and like a smash and grab. And that's what I was on about earlier. I don't want to be a smash and grab team. I don't want to watch Man United be a smash and grab team. I want Man United to be like a Man City who absolutely dominate anyone who they play against, and the other teams are hoping to do a smash and grab against them. You know what I mean, kind of thing. But that's not just against the top 6. You know what? Like say, Wolves look that way with Brighton next week. What we're going to do? What we're going to do against them? Are we going to play the same way against them? You know what I mean? It is a bit worrying that we've not formed an identification, like I said, with City, where they're going to play 95% of teams in the world and going to dominate possession and going to keep the ball and going to, you know what I mean, and look like they're the better team on the day, where we seldom look like we're the better team no matter who we play against.
Yeah. Let me ask you a point, because you talked about so Dan said 100% Lee, when we're not able to control games. You're talking about a unity and an identity. Part of that's called into question by the instant reaction after the game on Sunday, when Sancho puts online this comment about contradicting what Ten Hag said in the press conference. And I'll be honest, I saw Sancho's reaction before I saw Ten Hag's press conference, so I had to go back and watch what Ten Hag actually said, and it seemed pretty straightforward, really. There is a part of it that makes me that I'm inclined to think, he's a foreign-speaking manager. He's Dutch. He's going to be very blunt and to the point, which he was. He was saying, he hasn't. He was kind of like, why wasn't he in the squad? Well, he wasn't in the squad because we choose the players who train the best. That's the way that I saw it. And he took it to, like, obviously Sancho's taking it a completely different way in part of his statement. And the statement, I think, is still pinned to his social media platforms, which is crazy, really. And I think they're going to talk about it. That's what Sky Sports were reporting, that they're going to have some kind of conversation. Obviously, they're going to have to, because there's nowhere for him to go for a few months. Lee, I'll come to you first with this. Considering everything we've just talked about, and Sancho was one of those players. On maybe this is the drawback of something that happened last season, in that Ten Hag picked a really consistent side. It was obvious the team that he was going for, and Sancho wasn't always a part of that. And I don't necessarily, through the fault of the manager, I don't think he didn't give him a chance. He was playing him at the start of the season, and then they had the extended break for whatever reasons that haven't been disclosed. We can speculate. There was a mental health break that hasn't formally been disclosed. But he was given that break, and he was still given a chance when he came back. Yeah, all right. Maybe he hasn't been given a chance at the start of the season, and maybe all of us on this podcast were scratching our heads saying, why is Martial getting another chance? So maybe we'd give Jadon a run out. But at the end of the day, the manager's a manager. He makes the decisions, and it's not so much the complaining about the decision, it's the throwing everyone else under the bus as if like he deserves the chance and nobody else deserves the chance. That's the thing that grates with me, because that's the thing that doesn't seem to be a United thing to do. Lee, what have you made of this situation since the news broke on Sunday night when he posted that to his Twitter?
The way I feel about it, mate, and I'm sure the vast majority of footballers of my generation will tell you the same. You don't train well, you don't play. That's the written rule. You train every training session Monday to Friday or whatever it is, like you're going to be, you're playing against the team you're going to be playing against at the weekend. And if you're not putting that effort in and you're not showing that you've got that in you to make the team better, then it's as simple as that. You don't play, you get benched. Even worse, you don't make the squad. My generation, when we played, that was given. So if the manager turned around and said, "Well, he's not training well, he's not playing," that was the vast majority of the times. That's why you weren't playing. You know what I mean? I think it's a generational thing. It's how the game's developed. We either took it on the chin and said, "I need to work my bollocks off next week," so I get in contention to get back in the squad and in the starting 11. Well, I think to the lads today and their generation, they're mollycoddled. They don't like it. Truth hurts sometimes, Wayne. You know what I mean? And they don't like it. I think that's been a factor with how Sancho's reacted. He doesn't like probably the truth that he's probably not training well, and when he's been given his opportunities, he's not really took it. And I can understand his frustration because, like I said last week, Anthony at the moment he's got potential. I think that's what we said. He's got the potential to still be a really good player for Man United. He's just probably not shown it yet. And it's a hard one because in Jadon's head, he's probably thinking, well, if he's not showing it and he's playing week in, week out, I should be giving him a chance. But if you're not putting it in training, then you're not going to get your chance. So it's probably down to himself. If he's, tossing it off in training and not putting 100% in, he ain't going to get a game, and it is what it is. That's how I see it, mate. Anyway.
Yeah, Phil, really difficult one to call in a way because, there is this extra element of the mental health struggle or the extra struggle that he's had. That I do think the club have been fair with him, and he's trying to make. He actually made a comment on socials that he's been made a scapegoat, and I certainly not by the club because the club have backed him all the way, and I think no one would have wanted him to come out and have something like this. Such a disastrous thing to do, and I don't think I'm overstating that. That's such a massive step to take because you are engineering a potentially massive problem, a rift between not just the manager but other people in the squad by like saying that you deserve to play, and he's saying that other people aren't playing well enough to have their place in the team. And am I reading too much into that? Is this just the modern player's way of sort of expressing his dissatisfaction?
I think Lee's hit the nail on the head. I think it's a generational thing. I think nowadays players are put on a pedestal and sort of, they don't like being told, the truth, or, they think they're too good. There's no divine right that you're warranted to play every single week for the club just because, you're a big signing or, because you're a big name. You've got to put the work rate in. You've got to make sure that you're applying yourself on and off the pitch. And working your socks off every day in training. I think that for me is something that was always drilled into us playing for Man United. Every single session, whether you're representing the club away, whether you're abroad playing or you're just in your own time, you're always representing the club, and you need to make sure you're always 100%. And for me, reading between the lines, listen, I have no idea what's gone on, but I think reading between the lines, obviously, we can see quite clearly that Sancho, from the player he was at Dortmund, playing with that spark and sort of confidence and, the freedom really where, everything seems to be coming off. I think he's come to the club. Granted, it's not easy to come to Man United. It's a massive club. You have got that expectation and the pressure's different probably to any other club in the world. But I think for me, over this period, obviously with the mental health and all that kind of stuff, he's came back, and I think he did have a period this pre-season and sort of the back end of last season where I thought, he's turned a bit of a corner and he started to look a little bit more like himself. He started to, be a bit more positive and look like he was, starting to make inroads really into becoming, what kind of player we thought we'd signed. And I think just looking at it from my point of view, I think when the manager picked Martial the other week ahead of him in the game against Nottingham Forest, I think that was where, for me, it looks like to me he's maybe lost his head and spat the dummy out. And then obviously this week it might have been a case where he's just not trained as well because he feels let down, or he feels as though he was more deserving of a start and he wasn't. But as I say, we back the manager. The manager's the one who makes the decisions. He picks the teams. He puts a team on the field that thinks he can win the game. And as a player, you've got to accept that, whether you think you should be on the pitch or not. You've just got to be professional and make sure that you're ready to come on and do the business when called upon. So yeah, I think obviously, as I say, I don't really know what's gone on, but just looking at it from my outside opinion, that seems to be sort of what I can take away from what's happened. And I say it's a shame because we do think that Sancho has got a lot of potential. Otherwise, we wouldn't have bought him. We've seen what he can do, and unfortunately, he's just not sort of materialised up until at this moment. And these kind of things won't help his cause.
Yeah, it's a difficult one really, because I think now going into, because of the number of different problems that we've got with Anthony at the moment. We mentioned him earlier, and obviously he's got the news that's been breaking all week, more controversy for the club. Looks, I don't know, taking it on face value that if it is the case that there's some guilt in there, that, or at least it's strong enough suspicion of guilt that if the club do the same things they did with Mason, then he's likely to not be playing for a little while at least. And then that would give the opportunity for Sancho. If he'd had kept quiet, you would have just thought that's going to be a space in the team. But now I think most people are going to be wanting Palestri to get that chance to play on the right, because he's the one who's kept quiet, knuckled down, and hasn't had a run yet. Sancho's definitely had a fairer run than Palestri, and there are a lot of people who've seen the impact that Palestri has made in games and will be wanting him to get that chance. And I'm going to just briefly mention the Anthony thing, just only to say, throughout the Mason affair, we didn't comment on it because I didn't want to put anyone else on the podcast under the pressure of having to say something and speculate over an ongoing case. And Anthony, to this point of recording and whenever this podcast airs, has tested his innocence completely. So I don't want to be going down the road of speculating and saying whether or not he should or shouldn't play for us again, only to say that there's obviously a precedent there of what United did in the past. That's all I'm saying. What I will say is that that's not far from the only news story that's been in the papers this week regarding United. There's been 2 or 3 where you just think at this point in time, the club are being kicked when we're already down, and reporters have done this for generations, and I hate seeing it because I love the club, and I know like sometimes people will think that I'm a bit too soft on the club, and maybe that's the case, but I love the club and I want to feel defensive about them. I don't want to feel apologetic about that. And I just feel like sometimes a lot of people who are supposed to be supporters are gloating in the fact that there's a lot of stuff going on. And it's like, this isn't the United way. We're not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to rally round, like get behind the club and stuff like that. I don't want to see things like this. And I think that's the thing that disappointed me with Jadon. He knows that the club's being put through the mill at the moment, and he's added to that. And he just feels disappointing for that more than anything else. I mean, disappointed internally because there's going to be some people saying, "Oh, like, why do you deserve to be playing in front of me?" But those are the things that I guess happen at most football clubs anyway, whether or not we hear about them. It's just putting the extra spotlight on the club, and maybe that's just a point of not getting the club. I mean, you guys, both of you, I mean, Phil in particular, having gone through something that was controversial, not of your own making, but it was a controversial story, and the club had to sort of go with the punches with that, and nobody likes those moments, and the club rallies round and they move on together. And I just think if you don't get that, and like Ronaldo last season, why I was so disappointed with him taking it to Piers Morgan, is that he knew what he was doing and he put the club in such a negative spotlight, and it's just unnecessary. The last thing that the club needed was that at that moment, and too many people are reveling in it. That's my point on that. Anyway, normally we would preview a game on Friday night, but we're not going to be doing that. We'll be talking about Brighton next week. So I guess it's just a point of, before we wrap up a fairly short podcast, talk about the international break and talking about everything that I've just talked about, Phil. An international break, you would say normally it's a bad time for players or it's a bad time for United. You know, you want to get back on the pitch after you've lost a game of football. But that's like Manchester United of old, isn't it? You know, and this isn't Manchester United of old. Do you think it's a good thing that we've got the break to sort of take a few days out and take a breather?
Yeah, I do. I think, as I said, beginning of the podcast, I think looking at the first 4 league games that we've had, we've been nowhere near the standard or the levels that, we was expecting. So I think it was a well-needed break. Obviously, there's been a lot of injuries and things that have compounded, the way that we have started. But I think now is a good game to come back to, really. I think Brighton will be a fantastic test. We've seen what they've done at the start of the season, the brand of football that they play. I think it's going to be a really tough game, but it's a good game to come back to and hopefully try and prove a point and show that we are capable of playing against some of these top teams, because up till now we've been very underwhelming. And I think, as you just touched on there, I think you likes of Palestris and some of them players that have been on the fringe maybe and not really been given that fair opportunity or crack of the whip. I think with everything that's happening around the club with the Anthony and the Sancho sagas at the minute, I think it could be a great opportunity for someone like him to step in and really sort of take the bull by the horns, because I really like him. I have been sort of hoping that he would get more of a run in the team and an opportunity, because as he's proven in pre-season and when he does get them little cameos, he does come on and make an impact, and that's what you want from someone who's coming on as a sub. He's coming on with the right attitude. It doesn't seem to me like he'd be someone who is complaining and acting like he's warranted a starting place. He just seems to be knuckling down and doing everything he can do and waiting for his chance. So again, it could be a good little sort of ray of light for him to come in and maybe put his marker down and show that he can be a sort of regular starter. I do feel as though obviously these next few weeks now, when we do come back from the international break, are going to be a big couple of weeks. If we don't pick up results in these next few games, obviously that's going to compound a lot of pressure and add a lot of more negativity to the club, and I'm hoping that doesn't then snowball and we end up sort of having a complete write-off in the season, because we have obviously got a tough Champions League group as well. Bayern Munich and Galatasaray, 2 good sides there. You look at obviously maybe not winning the group, but it's going to be tough to even finish second in that group, because them 2 teams we've just mentioned are quality sides, and before you know it, you could be the season could be wrote off by Christmas, and that's the last thing that we wanted after last year. So I'm hoping that we can get a couple of good positive results, give some of these other players that have been maybe waiting for the opportunity a chance, and they can come in and take it, and as you say, we can just start watching and seeing the team playing with a bit more desire and a bit more. As Lee said before, we want to watch a team like Man United who's dominating games. And I'm not saying that we can dominate every single week, because if you're going away to Man City or Arsenal or whatever, you might have to play slightly different. But it is really worrying when, obviously, the first game of the season at home to Wolves, I was expecting us to be, coming straight out the traps, firing, dominating the game and getting off to a really positive start. And it hasn't been anything like that. So yeah, it's going to be a difficult season, but I'm hoping that we can, turn it around. And as I say, some of these younger players, or maybe some of the players that haven't played as much, can come in and prove a point and look to, keep a shirt and move forward.
Lee, is it a good thing that, considering how difficult it's been and considering the patchy form, I was saying, like, is it a good thing that United aren't back on the wheel straight away? They're not playing a game straight away. Is it a good thing for the players that they've actually been away from each other, and then they can like regroup at the sort of like middle of next week to sort of like say, all right, we're back together now, like kick on again. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of dissent in the camp with Sancho, a little bit unease with the result, a lot of bad negative press. The fact that they're away from the club at the moment, everywhere in the world, and then they're going to come back in a few days. Do you think that's a good thing?
Possibly for this squad, what we've got, yeah. On a personal note, I've never made it. I've made it clear. I don't like international breaks whatsoever. And for me, if I was a manager, and we've just had pre-season and we've just got back into it, and we've had the start we've had. Personally, on a personal point of view, I'm gonna put it right straight away. I don't want I don't want the break. I want to put it right in training. I want to get it sorted ASAP. Not have to wait. Worried that obviously, although we've got massive injury worries at the time now as it stands, I dread to think if anyone else gets injured, what's going to go on, in the break. So for me, as on a personal note, no, if it was me, I'd rather just tackle it head on and get things sorted ASAP. But like I said, with everything what is going on in the current squad, what we've got, maybe a reset might be something what we need. Gives Ten Hag a little bit more thinking time, another week to try and sort out and mull over what is going wrong and tactically what we can do better. Just going on the point with Pellistri, I was just writing a few things down 20 minutes before the podcast, and obviously I know we're not going to talk too much about the Anthony situation and the Sancho, but if it goes down the route of them not playing, and obviously there is opportunities there, the first person I did think of was Pellistri, but then I thought with the signing of Amrabat, which I think is going to be hopefully a fantastic signing. I've been calling for it all summer. And then obviously we're going to stick Højlund up front, it looks like. He showed enough for me the other day to show what he could potentially bring to us. I'm just wondering whether, with us having two fantastic defensive midfield players there in Amrabat and Casemiro, whether they're going to go to a 4-2-3-1 and possibly put the Casemiro and Amrabat as a two defensive midfield players. Stick Rashford on the left. Obviously, we've seen him score the goal the other day. And is he gonna trust the young lads, or is he gonna go down the route of putting the likes of Eriksen, who's a creative midfield player, in the middle, and maybe putting Bruno on the right? That's another thing I thought he may do, and go with experience and the lads he trusts, instead of putting the young lads in. I don't know which way I'd go about it. I've been battling through the podcast, thinking would I give a young lad a chance, or would I stick with that? Because that on paper is a strong squad. Obviously, we've got the back four issues, but if you look at the two defensive midfield players, and then you've got your three and your one with Højlund, it's still a very strong squad. You can give anyone a game.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I think you're right. I mean, he's played Fernandes on the right a fair few times now.
And it's the service for what you get off Fernandes. I think he's got a wand of a right foot. What he could whip them balls in for Højlund. He's big, he's strong, he's fast. I'm just wondering whether the service what he would provide, would it be a good option to have? And then obviously if Eriksen's flagging 60, 70 minutes, you could bring Bruno back in to the centre, replace Eriksen, and chuck you could get your Pellistri on then, give him 30 minutes, or even try Martial out wide, because sometimes when Martial's played wide, he's played better than when he's played as a number 9. For me, he doesn't do that much as a number 9. So you've got the options there. If he plays that formation, you've got the lad still there who's not injured, who's he could give, like I say, it still looks like a strong 11.
Yeah, he's also got Menu to come back. I think he was posting on socials that he's going to be coming back soon, so there's going to be the options there. Whether he goes with an narrow front three, I mean, like the other day, Garnacho was brilliant in that sort of little cameo where he came on as well. So him and Højlund, you would expect going to get some game time. We'll talk about that next week. I guess next week we'll be talking about Brighton and Bayern. A couple of massive games there for United. Not bad to talk about, to be fair. If you've enjoyed the pod, it's only a short one this week, but I guess I didn't want to get too bogged down in depressing things when it's already a hot enough Friday night. But if you've stuck with us, thanks for that. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please give us a subscribe on YouTube and on the platform you're listening on, and leave us a review as well on the platform you're listening on. Really appreciate it. As you will notice as well on the Loop on the audio podcast, that we're now part of the TalkSport fan network. I know I've said that at the start of the season, just wanted to repeat it. And thanks to them and also to Bible have been spreading the word about us on Instagram today. So appreciate that. And most of all, just appreciate the guys who listen to us every week, really, for tuning in and giving us your time over the week when you do listen to us or watch us. Really appreciate that. And we will be back next week to talk about Brighton and Bayern. Until then, stay safe, stay well. Thanks for listening and watching.